so this is our schedule for today. It's going to be our third session on disability justice. We're going to have presenters, Senior Disability Action, do an overview of what disability justice is, alongside Charlie Garcia-Spiegel. We'll be discussing the history of accommodations and DSPS and the experiments that could be done both at City College and outside of City College in regards to disability justice. Now we're going to do our introductions. So I'll just start it off. My name is Raia, I she, her pronouns. I'm a queer and neurodivergent student that's Vietnamese Chinese, and I benefited from the DSPS, or the Disabled Students Program Services program at City College. And I'm joined by my co-facilitator, Ziana.
Hi everyone, my name is Ziana Rodriguez and I am a student at CCSF. My pronouns are she, her. I've benefited from DSPS. I personally have a visual impairment and I also have ADHD. And I will be co-facilitating this meeting today. Okay, thank you so much, bye.
Thanks, Ziana. All right, and Ziana, if you could read the land acknowledgement, please.
Yeah, so we acknowledge that San Francisco is located on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We encourage non-Indigenous members to uplift the work of remitration and land taxes.
Thanks, Ziana. And I'm also including within the chat a link to donate to the Ramaytush Ohlone, but then for every native land you're on, I'm pretty sure there's also a land tax application or website you could go to as well. In regards to that, it's very important for us to be intentional with how we're creating Black, Indigenous, and POC-centered spaces. So we want to move forward by creating practices to prioritize BIPOC members and proactively decenter whiteness and dismantle white supremacy, anti-Blackness, misogyny, and colorism. Because of that, we'll open our facilitated discussion to be open only to BIPOC first, centering LGBTQ+ and disabled BIPOC, with the last 10 to 5 minutes being open to all, such as non-BIPOC. The chat, however, will be open to everyone, but we do ask white folks to please be mindful or we're taking up too much space. The Zoom sessions will continue to be open for anyone to join, so you don't have to be registered in our class to be part of the Zoom session. Another thing to note is that we are having a mutual aid fundraiser. Everything that we raise will be distributed back to our speakers, with a priority going to Black and Indigenous folks first, and hopefully with additional funding that will be raised for other mutual aid efforts. I'll just include the link to this right in the chat right now. And then you'll see a screenshot in the middle of the GoFundMe, and then it says the words mutual aid for Build Abolition 101 at CCSF, with just an image of Build Abolition 101 at CCSF with leaves and the words mutual aid. And on the right side, it just has funding information. So far, we've raised $250. Another aspect that we really want to consider within this class as we progress is collective care. We are joined by someone named Kari, collective care, in the sense where if anyone is by chance triggered, needs resources or someone to talk to, you could speak to Kari, and their name in this is Kari, so you could just message Kari and she'll be able to help you. There will also be a link for a care form, so throughout this entire session, if you have any feedback, you could fill out the feedback form, which I'll add into the chat right now. All right, and with that, I'm going to introduce our very first speakers, which will be Freddy Martin, Raia Small, and Bisma Farzansyed, alongside Yassi.
Yay, thank you. And so I will start screen sharing. Let me just make sure that I have the right slides up. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into disability justice and its connection with abolition. This is a small overview of what we will be covering today. So we'll have the 10 principles of disability justice led by Raia, a bit of a discussion on the historical connection of disability and incarceration, as well as its impact on COVID in nursing homes, prisons, and detention centers led by me. And a bit of an introduction to the Reparations Now Council and anti-Black legislation led by Freddy, and a link on how to get involved with us with Yessi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Raia. I use she and her pronouns. And yeah, so before going into the 10 principles of disability justice, just want to give a quick overview about senior and disability action. And so we are a community organization of seniors and people with disabilities of all ages. And we work on issues related to housing, healthcare, and transit. And yeah, our big focus is sort of the crossover between seniors and people with disabilities in terms of like our needs and demands in terms of making San Francisco and the Bay Area more accessible and just for our community.
All right, come on.
And if you're interested in getting involved, yeah, we're going to have a link to join or to talk more to an organizer later. Yeah, so yeah, I'm just going to start with the 10 principles of disability justice that really informs the organizing that we do, and specifically how we're thinking about the connections between disability justice and abolition. And this was developed by an organization called Simpson Ballot, which is a disability justice organization that mostly does like creative performance work. They do really amazing shows. They're based in San Francisco. I think they've done at least one on Zoom since the pandemic began. And yeah, I really recommend checking them out. And they developed these principles sort of as the foundation of the disability justice movement. So I'm just going to go through them. The first is intersectionality, borrowing from a quote by Audre Lorde. We can't, I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but we can't, lead single issue struggles because we don't live single issue lives. And this is, recognizing that ableism coupled with white supremacy, supported by capitalism, underscored by heteropatriarchy, has rendered the vast majority of the world invalid. So many of us are excluded by these systems. Two is leadership of the most impacted. We are led by those who most know these systems. The quote from Aurora Levins Morales, who's one of the members of Simpson Ballot. Three is anti-capitalist politics. In an economy that sees land and humans as components of profit, we are anti-capitalist by the nature of having non-conforming body-mind. Four is a commitment to cross-movement organizing, shifting how social justice movements understand disability and contextualize ableism. Disability justice lends itself to a politics of alliance. And this is part of why abolition feels so relevant, is that people with disabilities are also impacted by prisons and police and surveillance. And yeah, that's one reason that alliance is so important. Five is recognizing wholeness. People have inherent worth outside of commodity relations and capitalist notions of productivity. Each person is full of history and life experience. So pushing back against the idea that people need to be fixed, or people need to be productive, or people need to work in order to have value. Yeah, just everyone has inherent value and wholeness. Six is sustainability. We pace ourselves individually and collectively to be sustained long term. Our embodied experiences guide us toward ongoing justice and liberation. And this one is really important, I think, for organizing, because there's so much tendency to push ourselves and it becomes unsustainable sometimes. 7 is a commitment to cross-disability solidarity. We honor the insights and participation of all our community members, knowing that isolation undermines collective liberation. So people with different kinds of disabilities working together. 8 is interdependence. We meet each other's needs as we build toward liberation, knowing that state solutions inevitably extend into further control over our lives. 9 is collective access. As Brown, Black, and queer-bodied disabled people, we bring flexibility and creative nuance that go beyond able-bodied normativity to be in community with each other. So collective access in a simple way just means we all work together to guarantee that everyone can participate. It's not on, say, a person who's visually impaired to say, like, can we have an image description? Can we have, it's not on a person who's deaf to like make sure there's ASL. So like it's for all of us to be taking care of each other and ourselves. And 10, last one is collective liberation. No body or mind can be left behind. Only moving together can we accomplish the revolution we require. So that was a lot, but those are the principles that are guiding us. And I'm going to share a link too in the chat if you want to read more. So thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Bisma.
Yeah, thank you, Raia. That was a beautiful introduction to the necessity of organizing with disability justice principles. And so now I'm just going to lead us into a little bit of an understanding on the historical connection between incarceration and disability. And so first, just recognizing that abolitionist movements must contend with how disability and ableism intersect with carceral systems and settings, and there must be a commitment to abolish all spaces in which marginalized people are disappeared. And so recognizing that this has been inherently part of even the discovery of America in terms of colonial isolation and control, and understanding that captivity was fundamental to American freedom from the beginnings of the slave economy and Native genocide. And so one thing I would like to highlight is that drapetomania is actually a mental illness that was written in the books that actually justified it explained that enslaved people who tried to escape captivity were actually mentally ill, and that the treatment for that was actually an amputation of the 2 big toes so that people couldn't run. And it's to understand that conversation on disability has been that ongoing, in that it has to go back to how well you can perform and how you are viewed as a commodity within the economy. And so understanding that US institutionalization of people began in the 19th century, but the conversation on disability is much older, and that mass detention is motivated by the continuing application of eugenics and persistent race, gender, and class-based discrimination that lends us to see forced sterilizations in these spaces, as well as very specific gendered discourses on incarceration as well. And so that brings us to the modern day contexts of COVID-19 and its impact on prisons, nursing homes, and immigrant detention centers. And so first to name that ableism is a systemic oppression that allows society, systems, and individuals to assign value to people based on their appearance and ability to reproduce, produce, excel, and behave. And so it's important for us to center, similar to what Raia had been talking about with the disability justice principles, on the least accounted parts of our population, who at this present moment remain the hardest hit by COVID-19. And disability justice will also lend us to critically examine the relationship between disability and trauma within these settings as well. There is a porous relationship that exists between disabled people who are often in these centers to begin with, who are predominantly Black and Indigenous as well. And people with disabilities are disproportionately impacted by deprivation, violence, and/or precarity. And that these environmental and socioeconomic experiences are the cause, complicator, and even consequence of disability. And according to the Center for American Progress, people in state and federal prisons are 3 times more likely than the general population to report having at least one disability. And so this is to center that these are the people we should be organizing, uplifting, and working with, especially when we are told constantly to negate them from the periphery of our society as well. And so next, I'm going to take a moment to actually put up some statistics of the amount of people that are recorded to have COVID-19 within these settings. And so of the 1.4 million people in nursing homes, 667,659 COVID cases are confirmed in these settings. And it's a very scary number to understand that almost close to 50% of people in these sorts of settings are dealing with the virus and the pandemic to a very personal degree. And that long COVID is often a conversation on how disability is also a breeding ground for these illnesses as well. And this is just to give a sense of how bad the issue is and how personal this is in terms of the disability justice movement. And to also understand that these numbers are of self-reported cases and that the number is probably much, much higher than what is actually being shown on the screen as well. And so the next statistic I wanted to uplift was the COVID rates in prisons. And so this data is from the Marshall Project about the number of cases in June 2021 of COVID-19 across prisons. And this is also of cases where there has been a report made. So again, this is not necessarily the full scope of how bad the issue is. So of the over 2 million people who are behind bars in the United States, 512,864 cases of COVID-19 was reported in June 2021 among prisoners and staff. And it's also to understand that there is no state or legal apparatus to actually count the amount of death. So this is really just the organizing and works of nonprofits who are going into these settings and looking for self-reported incidences. And that is a very scary reality to sit with, is that we don't even know the amount of people that are sick behind bars right now. And so I'll pass it over to Freddy.
Thanks, Bisma. That was great. Thank you, Raia, as well. I'm the housing organizer, one of the housing organizers at Senior and Disability Action, and I'm gonna preface this by saying that with the Anti-Black Racism and Reparations Committee in San Francisco, I'm approaching this and looking at this from a person living with disabilities. So the first thing that I want to say is in August of last year, Shaman Walton, along with Mayor Breed and others, declared anti-Black racism as a human rights and public health crisis. The resolution declaring that anti-Black racism as a human rights and public health crisis in San Francisco, requesting that the City and County of San Francisco departments and agencies prioritize racial equity in all programs and advocating for local, state, regional, and federal anti-racist policies that advance efforts to dismantle systemic racism. So all these things that we're talking about are being put in action in this way, specifically for African Americans, but also inclusive of others. Racism is a system of structuring opportunity and assigning value based on the social interpretation of how one looks, which is what we call race, that unfairly disadvantages some individuals and communities, unfairly advantages other individuals and communities, and saps the strength of the whole society through the waste of human resources. Anti-Black racism is hostility towards, opposition to, pathologizing of, and racism towards Black people and culture, manifested through individual, internalized, interpersonal, institutional, or systemic interactions, decisions, processes, and outcomes. And public health studies have concluded that structural racism, not one's race, is the explanation for health inequities. And it's incumbent upon human rights advocates to ensure that San Francisco reconcile its legacy of harm and trauma inflicted on marginalized communities. And I include the Ohlone as well, and all communities of colors in this. Black San Franciscans have persistently had poorer health than their fellow residents in a wide array of measures. A cross-divisional group convened and established the Black African American Health Initiative to focus on correcting these disparities. In San Francisco, Black people have a lower life expectancy than persons of other races, ethnicities, and Black people have the highest mortality rate for 9 of the top 10 causes of death in San Francisco. Black San Francisco residents are the most likely to lack health insurance, and the adjusted rate of hospitalization due to major depression among Black African Americans is almost 5 times higher than among Asian and Pacific Islanders, who have the lowest rate. And Blacks also have hospitalizations likely to result from inadequate access to medical care. There's a whole section on this. I wasn't able to actually get the link, but Bisma included it in our slides and our resources for references. But there's a whole nother section on housing. And this is why housing is so important to me, because I feel like it's just another way that it's been used. Like you lock a bunch of people up, you criminalize them, you put people in situations like COVID has really exasperated and shown a lot more of the inequities so clearly. But if people aren't housed in San Francisco, I mean, I know we're talking about everywhere, but specifically San Francisco, if people aren't housed, how can, everything else starts to decline or fall apart. It makes it more difficult, and then you get displaced and you move out. So my personal effort and focus is on correcting this. It's on solutions. So we'll also provide, and I'll put some things in the link. There's the San Francisco African American Reparations Advisory Committee, and there's also one for the state, which I will also put in the chat. But the last thing I'm going to say is that the intersectionality is here because all of these issues are amplified for people with disabilities. Either it's difficult to access those resources, or people are not actually considering folks with disabilities at the table, or even seniors, but specifically folks with disabilities. Case in point, the advisory committee, the Reparations Advisory Committee has 15 seats. There is not one seat for a person with a disability. So to me, that's something that we also have to advocate for, but oftentimes we get left out of the conversation, or we're an afterthought. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of ways to tap in, and this is just really important work. Thank you everyone for being interested in this and being here. And with that, I will pass it to Yessi with, I think, 2 minutes to spare.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Freddy and everyone. That's great. And different ways to join us is you can get into our website. I can put it down in the chat, where you can sign up for the e-newsletter, and you can get the latest news or different actions that's happening to get involved more. You can also drop down your email, or we can, share our email contact to share with you guys, that you guys can email us, or we can email you. It's a great way to get involved. And there's many things that's happening with SDA that may be exciting to join. You can also be a member if you choose to, which is exciting in ways to get involved more. Yeah, here I can put the website in the chat.
Yay, thank you. And we also created an interest form specifically for this
Oh,
issue. So I also dropped that link in the chat. So please be sure to fill it out if you want to organize and hear more from us.
and there's a lot of stuff going on with the e-newsletter. You can get involved in action and culture and fun things to do as well.
Thank you so much. I know that Sienna will be introducing the next speaker as well. Go ahead, Sienna.
All right. Thank you to Senior Disability Action for making the connections between abolition and disability justice. Next, we have Charlie Garcia-Spiegel, who is a peer educator, student worker, organizer is around disability, mental health, queer and transsexual health, and many other related topics. All right, take it away.
Thank you. So yes, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to everyone at SDA who just presented. I'm a little scattered because about 5 minutes ago, I noticed my dog had gotten out, so I had to like sprint outside and bring her back in and make sure the door was closed. So excuse any scatterbrainness, but let me pull up my slide as well. Let's see, share screen, that one, share, and then let me put that to full screen. And I also shared a link earlier for some supplementary materials for my section, and those should be in the chat. And if the mods could just put that in the chat again for anyone who's joining us late. And so I'm going to kind of build on what SDA has shared with us and kind of apply some of it to the specific CCSF context. And I love the acknowledgement that y'all did at the beginning, and I have a practice of doing one before I do anything as well. So I'm going to do my own acknowledgement of land, of labor, and of responsibility. So I just wanted to acknowledge that this talk, while it's been delivered to a virtual audience, was written and delivered by a mixed race settler on stolen Ramaytush and Lishan Ohlone homelands. Additionally, much of the labor that made this workshop possible was done by unpaid or underpaid student organizers and community members. And something that I found out while doing background research for this was that City College's Ocean campus, where many of us would be gathered if we weren't in a pandemic, was actually built on the site of a former prison. So I would just love for, as we begin, for people to take a moment to reflect on the space that you're joining us from and on the people whose work has made it possible so that you could be here in the first place. So I'm gonna give that a second. Let myself breathe. And yes, let me do a quick reintroduction of myself. My name is Charlie. I am a student here at City College. I use he, him pronouns. And a quick visual description of me is that I am a white-skinned Caribbean Latino with dark curly hair. I have glasses and some facial hair, and I'm wearing a t-shirt and a button-up over it. And I gesture a lot with my hands as I talk. And I'm not sure how much of that will come through. I can't see myself right now. And so I want to state up front that the accommodation system that we have right now is wholly, totally insufficient, but I wanted to also examine how we got to that system in the first place. So I did a little digging, and I put on this slide some of the legislature and some of the historical events that are kind of the most relevant to the system that we have right now, focusing on the 1960s onwards. So first, I'll go through this part. This is not the fun part, but it is useful background info. So the first kind of beginning of the system we have now is the California Disabled Persons Act in 1968, which originally established protections for specifically physically and visually disabled people in California. And that has since been expanded, revised, edited, but it's important to note that the California Disabled Persons Act came about 2 decades before the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there is some precedent for California and our local context being a bit ahead of the curve when it comes to these things. At around the same time, in 1970, we see the beginning of the Physically Disabled Students Program at UC Berkeley. And that was founded by, among other people, Ed Roberts, who was kind of one of the first big names in disability advocacy, who had survived polio and who needed an iron lung to breathe at night. And he had to fight with UC Berkeley admissions just to let him enroll, despite being very qualified. And so he and a group called the Rolling Quads, which was a group of other physically disabled students at UC Berkeley, they eventually in 1970 were able to secure funding for the first student-led disability services program in tertiary education. So that's anything beyond, senior year of high school. And that has since been renamed the Disabled Students Program. It's still there, but something that you'll notice is that a lot of this begins with a focus on people with physical disabilities, not on people with cognitive disabilities or sensory disabilities or psychiatric disabilities. And then in 1973, the Rehabilitation Act, or the Rehab Act, gets signed into law, and it prohibits disability-related discrimination in federal programs and in any program that's not run by the federal government but does receive federal funding. That they drag their feet on actually creating the regulations needed for implementing this legislation. So in 1977, 4 years later, groups of disabled people across the country begin to organize occupations of federal buildings. And the one in San Francisco, which was at the ATW building, which is no longer the ATW building, but it's over in UN Plaza, what became at 28 days, what was at the time the longest occupation of a federal building. And there was a lot of cooperation, a lot of solidarity, a lot of coalition building with other groups in the area. And so that's just something that I want to point out, that even the stuff that we do have now that's totally not sufficient is stuff that we had to fight for. And in 1975, we get the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, which you may know under the term IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that's mostly notable for the fact that it gave us the term IEP, Individualized Education Plan. So if you've ever heard of someone talking about their IEP or about their 504 plan or their 504, as a stand-in for the accommodations they receive, that comes from the Rehab Act and from IDEA. And also in 90, we get the Americans with Disabilities Act, but again, not without fighting. There, on the 13th of March in 1990, the Congress has had the bill, they've had it sitting there, and they're not moving it forward. And so another group of, or a set of groups of disabled organizers and activists, they go to the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and since at the time there's no elevator to get up to Congress, it's literally just a flight of stairs. They begin, and this is again mostly physically disabled people, but they began to get out of their wheelchairs, put down their canes and rollators and walkers, and dispense with the mobility aids, and literally just begin crawling up the steps of the Congress building. And that kind of that publicity puts some pressure on Congress, and they pass it, and George H.W. Bush signs it into law at the end of July of that same year. And then it was a very, very restrictive law. It didn't have many teeth. So in 2008, we get the ADA Amendments Act, which is how we get most of the coverage that we have today for the different kinds of disabilities. And again, still not sufficient, but that's how we got to the system that we have now. And so digging into the current system at City College, the Disabled Students Programs and Services they offer some services, but they're also very limited in what they can and will do. So officially, what they offer is, letters for accommodations for classes. They'll offer free or low cost assessment for hearing tests and learning disorder assessments. They'll offer some specific courses related to disability that are typically about learning to live with that disability, or that are, adapted versions of other courses. And the last big thing that they offer is access to technology. There's an accessible computer laboratory at a few of the campuses. On Ocean campus, if you have a mobility disability, they will let you rent a scooter, not the e-scooters, the ones where you sit. And theoretically, they have other resources as well, but I've never actually seen anyone use them. And so on paper, that might sound great. That might be, oh, look at all these things that they provide, but it's really, it's not a system that works. The biggest thing is that it sees disability as a deficit. There's this idea that disabled students aren't capable of learning, aren't capable of engaging, and modifications have to be made in order to let us slip under the radar. And it's very, very individualized. It's like, okay, someone says that they, for instance, have a vision disability and they need large print materials. It's the responsibility of that student to, get the testing, get the paperwork, set up the meeting, bring the accommodations letter to the professors, have to sometimes fight with the professors to make them actually do their job. So it's really, it puts all of this extra work on the students. And because all of that work is on the students and on the professors, there's not a good structure for accountability. When professors simply refuse, they know that they're breaking federal law and they don't care. They or they think that it's okay if they're the ones doing it. And from experience, DSPS is very unwilling to actually follow up on that. They technically offer a grievance procedure, but they will do everything in their power to make sure you don't actually use it. I had a professor in the spring who was just refusing to implement the accommodations that I had, and targeted me for retaliation when I brought this up. And the response from DSPS was to drop the class. They literally just advised me to drop the class. So that's what I ended up doing. But there's no way to hold people accountable when they don't follow through on the commitments. And to contrast with the disabled students program at UC Berkeley, the DSPS at City College is externally imposed. It's not something that's organized by disabled students. It's not something that we have built for ourselves. It's something that the abled neurotypical structure has imposed on us. If you compare it to some of the other resource centers on campus, at the Queer Resource Center, where I'm a student worker, everyone in the Queer Resource Center who works there is queer. It's something that we have done for ourselves. It's something that we have control over. Whereas with DSPS, there's no information available on whether any of the people who work there are disabled themselves. It's very much liability mitigation and not a whole lot else rather. So going back to the process that I described of having to produce paperwork and having to justify our need for things, it furthers a culture of surveillance. We have to give up our privacy to have access to our classes. And it creates this adversarial relationship between students and faculty. It becomes, well, which of us is going to budge? Which of us is going to have to change? Which of us, and the power imbalance there usually means that the faculty don't have to budge and the students get pushed out if push comes to shove. And you know, in order to do this, it polices student action in that, you know, it restricts what accommodations you can have. It restricts what, you know, how you can describe yourself if you want to get those accommodations. And because of, you know, the health disparities and the inequities, it really restricts access to the most resource, which is usually white people, because when, you know, when you need paperwork to access any of these things, you know, who among us has the time and the resources and the money and, you know, all of those things to even get that paperwork in the first place? It's usually, you know, well-off white people. And every so often, one of the rest of us slips through the cracks and they don't know what to do with us. But there are some people that do know what to do with us, and that's us. And I have been really grateful to have seen and taken part in some of what I'm calling access experiments or experiments in access here on campus. And, you know, a couple that, one that I want to add here that is taking place elsewhere, but has recently come to my attention. But here, my first semester at City College, I had a professor who put the boilerplate accommodations section in because that's required in the syllabus. But then they also included a section talking about the ways that they would work with students to, you know, get their needs met, how they would be flexible on X, Y, and Z, how they would, you know, basically work with us to make sure we could get what we needed out of the class. And to experience that in my first semester was just absolutely amazing, but it's not something I've seen repeated very much. But, you know, what we're doing right now, remote learning, is something that has been around for a while. You know, City Online has been a thing. And that was, prior to the pandemic, that was a large part of the people who were taking online classes were, you know, sick and disabled people who either couldn't go to campus because, you know, they had a condition that wouldn't let them, you know, actually get there, or quite honestly, because campus isn't accessible. You know, if you've ever been on Ocean campus, you know, there's stairs everywhere. Half the elevators don't work at any given time. You know, the lights are just absolutely painful if you're autistic or you have migraines. So the school itself can be an access barrier. So people approach that by saying, well, let's do school from home. And in that note, I want to talk briefly about the project that I work on at City College, the Tea House. It's a community gathering space and peer education event series for transmasculine and masculine of center people. But the point of it is that in this pandemic, we've been able to really kind of think outside the box. We don't have that access barrier of the physical campus. We, you know, can organize events that are, you know, that are much more accessible than we would be able to organize if we were on campus. And, you know, I think a really good example of that is this class. You know, it's a course that's not led by it's a course that's not led by faculty, it's led by students. It takes place just entirely beyond the existing City College hierarchy, and it's beyond the jurisdiction of DSPS, which means we have the freedom and the flexibility to determine what access is going to look like for us. And it's a space that encourages us to try things out, see if they work, change it mid-semester if we find out that it's not working for us, which is something that you don't typically have the flexibility to do in, you know, a quote unquote normal class. And the last one, which isn't on the slide, but I will add it in the supplementary materials afterwards. A friend and mentor of mine, Professor Jillian Bisa, is teaching in person at Florida State University this year because whilst I was offered the opportunity to teach remotely and Professor Bisa is disabled, the grad students, the research assistants and the teaching assistants and the graduate student workers were not given that option. And so, I has been just like engaging on campus with the grad students, bringing their concerns up to higher ups, and they've managed to secure, some meetings with some of the members of the administration. So sometimes something as simple as like just taking the matters into your own hands can be an experiment in access. And I'm gonna go, okay, perfect. I actually am on time. So I wanted to, this is not a presentation where I tell you, where I give you like a checklist of if you do this, this, and this, it's accessible. This is about the approach to access. So when you're in a space to be facilitating an event or organizing an event or just going about your life, these are some things that would make sense to keep in mind. As we saw with the 10 principles of disability justice, access is a collective responsibility. It is something that we all, should be sharing the work for. It is something that we all can have each other's backs for. And it's not, and while it's a responsibility and while it takes work, it's not a burden. It's an opportunity to try something new. It's an opportunity to change how we approach things. Like I was just saying, it's a strategy, not a checklist. So, I can't tell you that if you include ramps and sign interpreting and natural lighting that you're accessible. It's very fluid. Access is about how you set up the event or how you set up your organizing, not just the individual bits. And it does go beyond the physical. As I mentioned before, there was, a very heavy focus on physical disability, in the later half of the 20th century, focusing usually on wheelchair users, other mobility aid users, sometimes blind and deaf people, but not so much any other disability. So there's many kinds of disability. Many kinds of disability, but many kinds of access, physical, sensory, emotional, cognitive, and temporal. So that's relating to time. And that's just a small segment of them. There's just so many kinds. And that compliance with legislation does not indicate accessibility. This is not something where we're relying on the state to tell us what is and isn't accessible. Something that's accessible is determined by the group in question. It's not something where we can just be like, oh, it's ADA compliant, that means it's good. That's usually a lot of places that even say they're ADA compliant aren't, but then ADA is the floor, not the ceiling. Relatedly, access is never complete or total. And this is something that I learned from another mentor of mine, Cal Montgomery. And the wisdom that he has shared with me is that nothing is just accessible, end of sentence. It's accessible to a specific group in a specific way at a specific time. So, it's very particular to the moment. And that's not to say that this is easy stuff to do. It's work. It's effort, it's time, energy, resources, planning, and that needs to be acknowledged and compensated. And when I say compensated, I don't just mean like handing over a stack of cold hard cash. So, a lot of people will definitely appreciate that. At the same time, with disability specifically, if you're on one of many public assistance programs, there's sometimes an asset limit. If, for example, if you're on Medicaid and you need to stay on Medicaid because that's the only way you can get medical treatment covered for your particular condition, there is an asset limit of $2,000. You can't have more than $2,000 in your bank account ever. So a lot of people, when they do access work, they can't be compensated in money because that risks benefits. So, you might offer to, do someone's dishes, or you might offer to, do some childcare for them. It goes back to the conversation that we've been having about mutual aid. There's many ways to contribute. Financially is always a good option when it's available, but it's not always available. And that's when you start getting creative. And in order to do this, it's, building access is a skill. And like all skills, it does require practice. And so, yes, I've left just enough time to do this. So my last slide is just a list of some prompts that I'm going to give you all, some time to, I'll read them out, and then they're not something that you have to complete right now or ever if you don't have the capacity, but they are some ways to practice building access. These are some of the things that you might do in the course of building access collectively. So, I'm going to read these out, and you can take some time now or during the break or later to pick one and just try it out and see how it feels. So the first access experiment is this. Find an image, either your image or someone else's, that was posted without an image description, and just write an image description for it. The second is practice giving a brief visual description of yourself. What do you include? What do you leave out? Why? And a visual description is what I did at the beginning when I was introducing myself, describing what I look like. The third prompt is pick a location or platform where you spend a lot of time. Now, imagine that you're hosting an event in that place or using that platform. Practice giving access information for that event or space. And the final prompt is to just reflect. What are your access needs? Which of your needs are already met by society and which are ignored? And to give a brief example for which of your needs are met, my favorite go-to is, say you want to get to the second floor of a building. You can't fly, so you have an access need for stairs or a ramp or an elevator to get to that second floor. If we could fly, then we wouldn't need stairs, we wouldn't need ramps, we wouldn't need elevators. But as far as I know, even the most able-bodied person does not have the ability to fly. So their access need for getting to the second floor might be a flight of stairs. I will let that kind of sink in a little over the break. If people want to share their answers in the chat here or in the Discord, they're very welcome to now or at another time, whatever your pace and capacity is. And I'm going to stop the share. These prompts are available at any point in the supplementary material. And I'm just going to briefly let you know what else is in that supplementary material, because this is just dipping your toes in. This is not comprehensive. So the supplementary materials includes the exact same text that I just shared with you. And once there is a video link or a transcript of this session, I will be putting that in there as well. It contains the citations for the timeline that I put together, and it also contains some resources for further study if you want to, take this beyond tonight, take this beyond what's in the reading list. They're not all the best sources, but a lot of them are ones that got me started. I've included this disclaimer there as well, that they don't tell the full story. They don't completely cover everything. They leave out a lot. They, focus on some kinds of disability over others. They leave out contributions from other communities, but they're a place to springboard from and to, get some background info to do your own research and talk to people and, do other readings. So I hope that, the supplementary materials are helpful for you all as well.
Thank you so much, Charlie. I actually first found out about or learned about image descriptions from you. It was a long time ago when I was working at the Women's Resource Center. And then Ziana was actually the one that encouraged CCSF collectives start practicing that in our social media platform. So it all stems from you, Charlie, and it's so great to see you now like presenting here and then learning from you as well. I know that Sienna has some like last comments before we go into our break. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciated the presentation. And I think that's all I'm going to share. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sienna. So we're going to start our 10-minute break. So again, as Charlie mentioned, please take the time, everyone, to really digest the materials both from Charlie alongside from the Senior Disability Action, and then come up with like whatever ideas or suggestions that you all want to explore when we come back for our facilitated discussion. And we will see you all back at 7:10 p.m. Also, if anyone from the class has any questions that they want to ask me, please feel free regarding like the course materials, any questions regarding the Discord. I'll still be here during the break and I could answer any questions alongside other coordinators too. Okay, everyone. So we're going to start with our facilitated discussion. Let's see. So if people have any questions, we're going to open it up to BIPOC first. Then later on, it could be open to everyone else later on. I actually had a question for Charlie. I know that you mentioned, so just giving some context about DSPS, where DSPS was cut by 40%, and then luckily that downsizing didn't happen. However, I do see what you mentioned regarding how it could be so much better for student initiated, much like the resource centers. I'm curious how you envision that happening.
You know, I do envision something like that, you know, in it happening in a similar manner to something like the QRC or the WRC or Latino Services Network, or, you know, any of they're calling them the multicultural retention centers, where it's run, you know, primarily by the people who are at the center of it, you know, run by and for people with disabilities, including people with cognitive disabilities, developmental disabilities, you know, beyond just the stereotypical image of like white dude in a wheelchair, which there are many, you know, white dudes in wheelchairs in my life that I love, and that's a very limited view of disability. And so, you know, something that would offer, you know, some of the formal supports that we kind of have to, you know, have in this hierarchy, but with teeth, basically. You know, people, there might be some peer advocacy going on where, you know, if you are struggling with inaccessibility in a class, you know, there might be another, you know, either another disabled student or a disabled faculty or staff member who can intercede on your behalf, or, you know, and working with professors to make things proactively accessible. You know, just kind of a group that, you know, identifies the needs of disabled students and disabled faculty and disabled staff on campus, works to get those needs met and gets compensated for it. You know, because a lot of disabled students, myself included, have put a lot of free time into trying to make campus more accessible. And, you know, I'm lucky in the sense that I have been able to do some of that during my work hours at the Career Resource Center, but that's, you know, that's still part-time minimum wage. That's not enough to live on in San Francisco. That is, you know, it doesn't honor the, you know, work that I'm taking on beyond my job description. So, you know, something like a center that actually reflects the student body and the wider community. Because something I forgot to mention is that the SPS is just for students. It's not something that faculty are supposed to use for themselves. It's not something that classified staff, that's not how they get, you know, whatever accommodations they currently get. I actually don't know how faculty and staff handle that. So if anyone does know, you know, let me know, because I have literally been trying to figure that out for ages and I have no idea. But something that would give, you know, students, faculty, staff, just the community as a whole, something that we would all have a material interest in, something that would proactively work to make classes and campus accessible, something, a place where disabled students could go and study, could go and hang, could go and socialize, could go, you know, get some kind of, you know, like personal or academic counseling, you know, tailored support, and a place that they can go to that if things go wrong, there's going to be someone who actually has their back. And that's pretty much what I envision.
Thank you, Charlie. Seems very much peer-based, which I really like as well. And I'm just going to open up again the space for anybody that has any questions. Right now, we're prioritizing BIPOC voices. And I see a hand raised by Rosie. Go ahead, Rosie.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Charlie. That was a great presentation, very informative. I was looking at the link that you sent with just different resources, and on the paragraph, I noticed that you talked about the disability community being rights centered versus justice centered. And I was wondering if you could expand on that and some of the key differences.
Yeah, absolutely. So, disability justice, as SDA, shared with us, is, it's a very specific framework. It has those 10 principles, and that is a framework that was developed in, I want to say, the late 90s or the early 2000s. So it's, as a formal practice, it's relatively recent. And it doesn't rely on the state for things. It's very, community based. It's very, we do the things that we need to get things figured out. Whereas a rights-based framework, relies on legislation. It relies on court cases. It relies on the police. It relies on, it relies on the state in ways that, for example, if I have a professor who's not implementing accommodations I need, that's a violation of federal law. If I were to take that and run with it and try to get any kind of support around that, it would be going through the government. It would be, it's not the harm as identified by the government in that case is not that, I was shut out of a class or that I couldn't access what I needed to. It was that a law was broken. So it puts more of an emphasis on the rules and on the needs that people actually have. And when you try to codify things into law, it's very messy. There's lots of loopholes, and people use those loopholes to get away with things, and not, they'll follow the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. And so, a rights-based framework says, I am entitled to a quality education in the least restricted environment, but a justice-based framework says, what does everyone need in order to learn and grow in this space?
Thank you.
I also see a question in the chat from Freddy, or a comment saying that, what about a disability students union or a culture club?
So wait, is that at me or one of the other, or was Freddy asking that to one of the other presenters?
No, well, I am one of the other presenters.
Yeah,
I was asking you because I was hearing what you were saying, and what I was thinking, it just reminded me of when I was at City College. It reminded me of the Black Student Union, what you were saying, because that's kind of what it provided for us. So I was wondering if a disability culture club or a disability students union, is that something that I was just, that could be a possibility for doing what you said, providing that space. But I mean, I didn't necessarily utilize it a lot when I was there. I was the class of 2001. And and I thought that they had that there when the place where I could go and take the test, or where I had a study space, or if I needed a little extra time, I was able to go there. I just didn't utilize the other things, so I don't really know what else went on there. But it just sounds like for a place to go and hang out and have that support and do those things, that would be a possible good center, possibly, or a solution.
Yeah, I mean, a disabled students union is a pipe dream of mine that I've had pretty much since my first semester. It's really just been about capacity for me. one of my many disabilities is a chronic illness that limits my energy, limits my, you know, my executive function, it limits the number of things I can do in a day. So, you know, I just, between classes and student work and, you know, chipping in on other efforts, you know, it's just something where I haven't had the capacity to pull people together and to be like, hey, do we want to do this thing? But, you know, that is a dream of mine. And yeah, the DSPS as it stands, they do offer some of those things, but, you know, they require the paperwork and they require, you know, the proving and the justification. And so a lot of the people that need it can't get access to it. And so, you know, my dream is a place that, you know, doesn't ask for paperwork. It's just, oh, you need some more time? Here, you can do it here. Or you need this specific software? Here you go. Just meeting people's needs rather than being like, okay, I need you to justify why you deserve it.
I have a comment. It's not a question, but I know when I was going to City College, there was the accommodation was very useful, a lot of it, but there was also some things that I wanted extra accommodation, but I feel like I had to prove myself. I had to prove that I have this certain disability where I was told that I don't need that one. I need this other accommodation when I really kind of knew what I needed. So I feel like there was something that was dismissed as far as a accommodation, because I needed, like you guys were talking about, proof, and also, and then I was like, well, okay, well, I guess I don't need it, but in actuality, I needed it, you know? So I went along what I was given rather than just fighting for what I needed. So that's something hopefully be able to be changed in the future. Not letting people know that this is your disability, but not speaking for people what their disability is, but letting people speak their own, because they know themselves more than anyone else knows. So just wanted to say that. Thank you so much, Charlie.
And thank
Right
you
on, yes,
for sharing that.
So I'm hearing it's more centering the autonomous decisions. And then I also want to read a question from Kari, unless Kari, you would want to read it out loud yourself. Okay, so I'll just read it out loud. So then Kari is asking all the speakers, if you all want to talk about what you all think when they envision abolitionist care center alternatives to the spaces, institutions that are currently used to house or disappear disabled folks and elders, like nursing homes, psych wards, or long-term care facilities, as well as prisons and jails.
I can start by answering that question a bit. This is Bisma, one of the presenters from Senior and Disability Action. I think this really sits at the crux of like why abolition is so important. And it's not just the abolition of these spaces, but for the economic practices that allow for these places to be for profit in the first place. So I'm thinking about like what it means to organize for housing, what it means to organize for food security and things of that sort. Like when our basic needs are met, how can we come and envision community together? And that's not something we're often asked to do in a capitalist economy and structure, is to hold people accountable and to move in ways that actually support the growth of the people around us. And so it would mean the abolition of these spaces altogether and replacing it with community-based measures of reform. And I can speak for myself personally. I think my abolitionist principles goes really hand in hand with Marxism principles as well. So understanding that locally based care and indigenous sovereignty is, of course, at the forefront of all of these things. And to understand that putting people away and not dealing with these sorts of issues is not a way to solve the problem. It's to disappear them in the first place. And so part of the question and reach of every abolitionist is to actually ask these questions and to think about the needs that you would want to voice to your community and how that would be reciprocated and appreciated. So it's a longer question, but I think it's a very, very important one.
Thank you, Bisma. And if anybody else from Senior Disability Action would like to answer.
I can add just a little bit. That was such a wonderful response, Bisma. Yeah, just thinking about, yeah, something that comes up a lot for us at SDA is, like institutions like nursing homes and like mental hospitals, and how these are kind of proposed as the care that people need, when, actually like the care that people need comes with like independence and autonomy and living in the community and not being segregated, whether based on age or based on disability, and how it's often because of budget cuts that people get institutionalized too, like because like they cut community mental health programs, so then people end up like having a crisis and the only care they can get is in a mental hospital, and then that's a locked environment. It's very jail-like, and often lots of abuse happens there, and it also just doesn't help people like recover in their community and like in a way that is more like sustainable and connected to others. And and also with nursing homes, like how we've seen in the pandemic how horrible they've been, and just how so many elders in our society get pushed into nursing homes because they need care that's not funded and not provided for at home. And so, yeah, a big thing that we push for is like funding like in-home supportive services in California, that anyone who needs care, whether that's like someone to come to their house and like prepare food or do laundry or like help them shower, help them like take care of pets, like stuff like that, or whether it's like nursing or medical care, like a lot of that can happen in people's homes if there's proper funding and support. And almost everyone would prefer to be at home, live with who they want to live with, like eat when they want to eat, wear the clothes they like, wake up when they want to wake up, like all these things that are like so important to all of us. So yeah, thanks for that question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Those were really good responses. This is kind of a loaded question for me, because recently one of the members at SDA, he's in a wheelchair, power chair, and he does work in the community with other folks. He was specifically focused on youth, but one of the things that it was really disheartening and daunting to me, which was that he shared that there were several people that he has worked with historically that are people with disabilities, and they don't want to leave the institutional setting. And my thought was, what has society done, or what has happened to make them feel that way? And those are the things that need to be changed and subverted. But when he told me that, and I looked at it, I'm thinking, there's, and so this is the other point, like, say if you're living in an SRO and you have a power chair and the elevator goes out, how are you going to get to your appointment? How are you going to do whatever it is that you need to do? If you do have a in-home support service person there, how are you going to get down the stairs? And it just, so there's so many things that are like intersectionally happening within institutions when you're living on your own, and or however it is. What I envision is a place where, like what Charlie was saying, that should be not only at City College, that should be in the communities, that should be in the buildings, that should be the support that we provide for one another in whatever ways that are necessary. Because Raia, when you said that thought, you were like, I'm sure everybody wants to be in their own bed or in their own home, and not set upon conditions that are set for you by someone else. And then I thought about the people that the member had told me about, and I'm like, I wonder if that's what they really want or what they really feel. And I think that's probably true, but it's just the fear of not having that support. If you're being treated this way in an institution or somewhere where people are supposed to be taking care of you, then what can you expect when you go outside? So it's like, I don't know, that would just be something I think really important to research and to look at when we talk about this.
And I'll add very briefly onto that. You know, when I envision care-centered alternatives, I look to models that are already existing. There's a lot of really good work, you know, being done outside of the structures of the state. There is, you know, the Berkeley Free Clinic, which, you know, provides, you know, some basic medical care, you know, there are peer-run supervised consumption sites for people who use substances. There are peer-run respite houses, which offer, you know, a place to stay if you're experiencing mental health crisis and you need someone who has lived through it to, you know, to just be there for you. You know, I do work with Mental Health First, which is a project of the Anti-Police Terror Project, where, you know, and actually my next shift is coming up this Friday, you know, on Fridays and Saturdays from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., you know, we hop on the phones and, you know, if people are experiencing a mental health crisis, if people are witnessing, you know, violence, if people are, you know, unhoused and just lonely, you know, they can call us and, you know, right now, everything is distant. So we're just functioning as a hotline. But we are planning to eventually move to dispatch. So at some point we'll, you know, be going out and just helping people and just trying to meet their needs. What they ask us something, we try to get it, you know, we try to get it for them. You know, there are so many, there's already so much experience and so much wisdom and so much skill, you know, that just comes from living as a disabled person on this earth, whether that's, you know, whatever kind of disability you have, that I look to models that make use of those skills and, you know, put disabled people as the experts rather than relying on, you know, professionals. And, you know, if someone needs training in, you know, how to use a Hoyer lift, then that's something that you can get them, you know, that like we can fill in those gaps without relying on the state or without relying on, you know, those external structures. I look to the stuff that's there and try and think of ways to, you know, implement my own version of that or, you know, expand something that's already there.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing how care can be restructured. I wanted to ask, do any other Black, Indigenous, or people of color have any questions? If you do, you can raise your hand or put them in the chat.
Okay. I do see Freddy's comment regarding mutual aid. And also Kari mentioned that if anybody else wants to answer that question from our cohort, please do. In regards to, you all also see these care spaces being restructured. And as for time, we initially have the facilitated discussion for BIPOC being open until 7:35. And then after 7:35, the discussion will be open to all. So I had a question regarding accessibility and the participatory governance committees, or I know that the PGCs are the ways that students get involved in the governance. It's inaccessible. A lot of the information isn't distributed en masse, and a lot of it is also just hard to be engaged in. I was curious if there could be something done where it is made more streamlined, I guess, and way for more people to participate in it, if that makes sense. And I guess that could apply to like any other anything else regarding governance.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
I had a question about how the accessibility or the ADA compliance could apply to participatory governance committees.
I might have an answer, but I'm not sure if it's what you're looking for.
Go ahead, Sienna.
Um, hmm. So what I'm understanding is you're asking how accessibility can be put into the participatory governance council, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think getting in touch with each of the people who run those meetings, or possibly getting in touch with the Associated Students Council, because they're also involved with them as well. That's one way. At the moment, I think that's the only way I could think of right now in terms of, bringing it up to them.
Got it. Thank you, Sienna. So again, I just want to open up the space for any other questions. If not, it'll be open to everyone now. All right, so I'll just have the space be open to anyone to answer any questions or ask any questions. Please feel free to also provide comments.
And while people are putting questions together, if they have them, I was waiting to see if anyone else wanted to go first, but with regards to your question about the PGCs, they have been a bit of a thorn in my side since pretty much the first semester I heard about them, mostly for the reasons that you mentioned, around just the lack of communication, which I mean, I think is a problem at City College in general. It's a big school, lots of moving parts, and information doesn't get where it needs to be. There are things that are mainly passed along by word of mouth. There are things that should be promoted that aren't. And I think, if we do, it's something where I don't see much point in relying on, the administration to do what they're supposed to. So if it's something that, we want to make noise about, I think it's something that, it's a matter of organizing. It's a matter of showing up to the meetings that we can find information about, raising as much of a fuss about it as we can, and then escalating it if we need to, talking to, communicating, like not getting up in the face of, but like making sure like the board of trustees knows that this isn't accessible, making sure that, the chancellor knows that it isn't accessible, making sure that the public knows that it isn't accessible. Maybe we take it to the media, maybe we, it's a matter of, getting momentum on it, and try and to kind of drag that change into existence. And if it doesn't work through the official channels, just DIYing it. If someone is on a participatory governance committee, just start modeling what accessibility looks like in that space. Just start, at the beginning of a meeting, the first time you speak, give a visual description of yourself, or, start requesting, materials in large print. Just start, basically just making noise about it until they can't ignore it anymore.
Thank you, Charlie. It seems like it's chipping away at it and then also just creating your own alternatives, which is often the case, it seems. I was particularly interested in it in terms of the budget too. I know, for example, the Oakland City budget, they have a visual description, and then every allocation could be magnified and more info is allocated to it or detailed. And I wonder if that could be implemented through the CCSF budget. And if that, like, upon seeing the budget, just seeing what's left over so it could carry into like the DSPS student union or whatever you're mentioning regarding that. So just some random thoughts that I had.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that thing with the Oakland City budget. If you have like access to that, I'd love to get a link to it so I can just know what I'm looking for, because that's news to me, even as someone who grew up in Oakland. So I'd love to learn more about that and to to continue that conversation, you know, going forward, because that's something I would need to do more research about.
For sure. Thanks, Charlie. So again, I'm opening up the chat or the space to anyone that has any questions. And if not, then we're going to just go into the reflection section. I'm going to the reflection. And this is a question that we've asked our speakers, which is, in your wildest dreams, how do you imagine building an abolitionist world together? And how do you see that overlapping with CCSF? And I'll also include this question in the chat.
Can we type the chat, the question in the chat, please?
I like how you all are being polite and waiting for someone to speak first. And Yessie, you're also welcome to answer it as well.
Thank you.
Ara, could you type the question in the chat that you just asked? Oh, I see that you did already. I'll just paste it again.
Okay, I see that Charlie mentioning if anybody from SCA would like to go first, feel free. But if anything, take your time, please, to like really imagine what the answer to this question can entail.
Well, I will start it off briefly. And of course, I'm going to focus on housing. But I mean, you know, it's just speaking to the accessibility issues at City College that were being talked about, you know, just on the campus in general. I'm wondering about the living situations, and not just CCSF, but other like universities, the dorms or whatever they're like, it's hard enough to get it in mainstream, you know, correctly or accessibly designed, adequately, appropriately designed units. I'm wondering what that's like in the, you know, in the college system. And okay, so Charlie is shaking his head. That means it's non-existent probably. But for me, that would be what that would look like. And I started typing it in the chat, but I'll just say it. Just having all housing built with accessible designs and people with disabilities in mind. Like there should be no unit that is under a certain amount of square footage. I will say 500 or 600 square feet just for, I mean, you know, these micro units are killing me. I'm like, how can you, anyway, so I'll just leave it there. I'll give other people a chance to speak, but that's one thing that I think in my world or in an abolitionist world, that's what it would look like. You know, there's no housing that's being built that doesn't have our needs or, you know, disability designs or needs in mind.
Thank you so much, Freddy. I know there's a college, I think Cerritos College had affordable housing made 100% free for homeless students, but I don't think it's specified accommodations as you've outlined. So that's something interesting to explore. Just leaving the space open for anybody else.
And I'll jump in and build off of that. And yeah, for context, I attended another college before coming to City College. I got an injury on the East Coast where I was that I needed to take medical leave and come back So I've lived in a dorm before, and oh my God, no, there is no accessibility. There is no, it's bad. It's real bad. But you know, I think in terms of the question, I imagine building an abolition, or in how I imagine building an abolitionist world is by just getting our hands dirty and starting to do the work ourselves to meet our own needs. To, you know, again, I look to models where people are already doing this. I look to Mental Health First and APTP. I look to the examples in care work. I look to the peer respite houses. I look at the peer run clinics I work at, or I look at, you know, the work that's already being done around self-defense and community defense, and, you know, just following their example, honestly, you know, and not to act like these projects have no flaws, but you know, they're very vulnerable and very earnest experiments in what an abolitionist world would look like, and I think that that's a really good first step. And in terms of how I see that overlapping with City College, I mean, I think just trying it out ourselves, you know, getting together and making sure people get fed, getting together and making sure that people, you know, have smoke masks during wildfire season. Like, you know, taking the example of Mask Oakland, which is run, you know, by a, you know, a queer, trans, plural, disabled woman, you know, making sure that, you know, our people get fed, making sure that people get housed, making sure that people can access medical care from someone who isn't going to leave them to die, making sure that we can educate ourselves and others, which is something we're doing right now. We're already, you know, when I imagine building an abolitionist world, I don't imagine something in the future. I just look at what we're doing right now. Like that, none of us are, you know, like has been said before in this class, none of us are going to live to see the day where, you know, everything is 100% perfect and all of that. But we can do the work right now. We don't need to wait for anybody. We can just be like, okay, well, I'm going to learn how to do, you know, conflict de-escalation. I'm going to learn how to administer Narcan. I'm going to learn first aid. I'm going to learn, you know, how to do real-time captioning. I'm gonna learn how to, you know, draw blood for a blood test. You know, like whatever the skills we need, just taking it into our own hands, learning it, practicing it with each other. You know, just taking advantage of what's there when we can, and building it when it's not there.
Thank you, Charlie. You speak with so much hope. I love how you described it as abolition happening right now, and all these skill sets being essentially made doable. It's something that we could achieve at this present moment. And I just want to open again the question back to all the other speakers.
Yeah, I can briefly also respond. I think when I think of an abolitionist world, I think of a world without mystery. I think of a world where everyone knows who's in their local community and knows where their food is coming from, where their water is sourced, and where accountability doesn't mean being sent away, but it means living within the community and solving those issues and working to understand what compromise means while recognizing each other's wholeness. And it means in a world where like white supremacy isn't the norm, but rather something that we acknowledge of the past, or something that we're actively fighting against constantly. And so kind of related to what everybody else has said, it means that we're not questioning the basics of where things are, who we are, but rather can come together to a community of care and an economy of care. And in relation to CCSF, I think even the pursuit of education and cross-movement solidarity, having students work with people of all ages, generational work is all going to be part of that equation.
Thank you, Bisma. I love how you emphasize the origin of things. And again, what I find current in your answers is this idea of taking back our own economy, which I really appreciate. I know that we have Raia left alongside with Yessi, so whoever wants to go first.
I actually put mine in the chat, but I could say something from that. But I think that we may not have everything right now the way we imagine everything to be, or in our own way. We all want everything to work out this lifetime, but I think I would say from my own imagination is that to, along with Freddie and everyone says, is that to have, you know, more accessibility, unlimited accessibility to housing, you know, healthcare, especially like for students, you know, free housing and stuff, and, you know, just kind of like living in a world that we're having more empathy for one another, sorry, having empathy and, you know, humanity towards each other. And I think that with having that, we can be able to, like, you know, move forward to trying to make a better place, a better living for all of us, and kind of like living in amongst with each other without judgment, without, you know, dismissing one each other, without even you know, because of our differences or anything like that. You know, I think just living with humility, and kind of having unlimited access, and also letting people be the leaders who are the expert. Because if those are not the people leading to make changes, who else will? You know, nobody else will. The experts are just the people who make decisions are just the people who make decisions. They're not the one who have lived experience. So I think having the people with experience who are the expert be the leaders is a start of making, you know, movement and revolution and just changing. And also that's leading to CCSF, like not leaving out students. There's a lot of students with, you know, disability, and also, you know, with a lot of powerful, you know, experiences and stuff, and want to tell stories of their lives or their experiences and stuff, you know, expanding that, because there's a lot of young people who are fighting to be part of change and stuff, and also including those, you know, those students with other older generation or younger generation, because I think those are the leader for the future. So yeah, it's just involving that. So that's what I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Yessi. There's so much warmth and strength in everything that you're conveying. And I also love how supplementing that is people in the chat providing mutual aid. So Micah, thank you so much. Alongside with Charlie, if people want to get fed, you know, like who to contact. And I'm sure there's so many other mutual aid efforts that everyone in this cast truly is a part of too. I know that we have Raia that will go next. Go ahead, Raia.
Yeah, yeah, everyone spoke so beautifully, and I feel like I don't know how much I have to add, but just thinking of, you know, a world where everyone's needs are met, and, you know, as like Yessi spoke about, people are like, you know, the authority on what their needs are, and we all take care of each other, you know, where it's not about just like getting ahead individually, but it's about like leaving no one behind. And I think this class is a great example of that, like just how you all have put it together, and how it's, you know, open to anyone, not just City College students. It's free of cost. People's access needs are taken into account. It's really looking at, you know, abolition in so many different ways. And yeah, and just, you know, programs like Free City College, and like, these are all things that we could have so much more of, you know, if we didn't have prisons and jails and police. And like, yeah, I think just like sustaining those programs and building them and fighting for them is also a really important part of abolition. And yeah, I'm just really grateful to you all for inviting us, and also just for holding this class.
Okay, and I believe, Sean, you had a question. Would you like to share that question?
Thank you. I was really just raising my hand to comment on Charlie's comment about dorms not being accessible. I went to Sac State in like 2010, and like there was a freshman, and we have freshman dorms, and we had like junior and senior dorms, and there was a dorm that was like brand new, and the freshmen that were the fresh people right, that were that had disabilities had to go to the had to use the newest dorm, which is like fortunate to them, it's the newest one, it was the nicest one, but they still should have been able to stay in the freshman dorms as well. And like that was the only dorm that was accessible to people with disabilities. And I just wanted to like echo and reiterate what they said. Like I saw that firsthand. That's it.
Thank you, Sean. So before Ziana, I'm not sure, Charlie, if you want to respond to that or.
Sure, I'll say something real quick. Just like, my God, yes. Thank you for bringing that into the room, Sean, because it was the same on the East Coast. There were the college that I went to, I somehow managed to get into Sarah Lawrence for a year and a half, and it's an old campus, and it's very inaccessible, and that was part of what made my disabilities worse. And I had to come home, and I was lucky enough to end up in a dorm that was, for the most part, accessible. But as I then began to choose my dorms for sophomore year, it was a mess, and people, the Office of Disability Services, was very, very not committed to helping people get housing where they needed it. Not even like accessible housing. A friend of mine, her mother was a lawyer, and she had to bring her mother in to like scare the living daylights out of the people at the Office of Disability Services. And like, that's not something that most people have access to. We're not, I'm definitely not running around with a lawyer for a mom. My mom can be terrifying when she stands up for me, but she's not a lawyer. So, it's like dorms as they are a mess. They don't, account for the fact that, a lot of people are engaged in the community beyond just the campus. It really isolates students, especially at four-year colleges. It isolates them, to the campus. It discourages people from connecting with the community, from knowing who our neighbors are, once you step off campus. And so I, thank you for picking up on and carrying that dorm conversation, because I mean, in the abolitionist world I envision, dorms don't exist. People just live where they want to live, whether that's, in a community that's on campus or in a community that's off campus, but that it's not just you live in a dorm, you go to school, you stay on campus, you don't interact with the community.
Right,
you,
that was
Charlie.
another thing. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say that's another thing. A lot of the buildings that people had classes in were old too. So it just really harmed like a lot of disabled people, and they weren't able to access certain buildings because these buildings were super, super old. So I wanted to add that to it as well.
Thank you. So before Asiana gives a closing, I also want to thank Charlie for meeting up with the coordinators and giving us tips on accessibility and how to make this more accessible for the class. Thank you so much. I really take into heart what you mentioned about that it's a strategy, not a checklist. And again, appreciate Bisma, Freddy, Raia, you all. And also, Yesis, it was great to see you again. I'm so glad that we're all present, and then we're building that abolitionist community, as Freddy said. So go ahead, Sienna.
Can I see you?
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. All right, go ahead, Sienna.
More.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you so much to everyone who shared tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, I think everything that was shared was really powerful. It's really great to be in a community where people care about disability justice, because people with disabilities are the largest minority group in the world, and we're always the last ones in line for advocating for that kind of, I don't know if that's the right word, but we're always the last ones to be thought of when it comes to making things accessible, or, you know, in terms of just any situation, like even any major situations, you know, we're always like the last ones to be thought of. And I wanted to again say thank you so much for everyone for sharing and for being here. I'm sorry if I'm kind of rambling on. I'm a little bit tired.
You're good,
but
Tiana. Thank you.
thank you. But I
Thank you
also
for-
wanted to share that ARA will share a care form for people to fill out in the chat. So if you want to click the link in the chat, you can always copy and paste it to the little Google search thing or whatever search engine you use. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sienna. You did awesome. Sienna was asked last minute to co-facilitate and you did a great job. So thank you so much. All right, and have a good night, everyone. And I'll see folks for next Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a great night.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See y'all.
Night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Maggie. Okay, I'll see you later, Sienna. We're just gonna have like a meeting with Kari.
Kari left, actually. Do you, thank you, Ziana. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Do we want to text Kari and see if she wants to come back or something?
Actually, did Sean
Sean's texting me right now. Sorry, I can't hear you right now, but